It's your returning champion, Elgintensity, aka Michael Treporbius. A recent landmark decision has affected the options that women have when male swimmers ruin their lives. I'm of course referring to the new restrictions on transgender women in sports. On June 19, Fina, the world governing body for swimming, essentially banned trans women from competing in the highest levels of international sports. It prohibits them from competing unless they began medical treatments to suppress production of testosterone before going through one of the early stages of puberty, or by age 12, whichever occurred later. This addresses the physical advantages that trans women get when they go through puberty and keep when they go through hormone therapy, as displayed by Michaela Phelps over there, aka Lia Thomas, the first openly transgender athlete to win an NCAA Division I national championship. People were watching the man cruise, break records, and overshadow the competition before Top Gun Maverick. Under Fina's new policy, Thomas is disqualified from competing as a woman at the 2024 Paris Olympics as he planned. Fina will also consider an open category for those whose gender identity is different than their sex assigned at birth. You might not be able to eliminate dragon swimming, but you can drastically reduce its effects. Fina's rules apply only to international competitions, but could guide other sports federations that deal with this issue. Hopefully they adopt these rules too. That way a guy who struggles to win can't switch where he swims just because he walks with a switch. Australian swimmer Maddie Groves was one of the first athletes to speak out against Fina's announcement. My hope that a young gender-diverse child can walk into a swimming club and feel the same level of acceptance. So you ban them from competing with their peers? You're okay with ostracizing an already marginalized group? Real accepting. Except trans women aren't swimming with their peers. The problem isn't celebrating trans athletes, it's trans athletes celebrating unearned championships. Notably, Groves withdrew from Australia's Olympic swimming trials last year over misogynistic perverts. She must not know how swimming works in the US, because if there's anything misogynistic and perverted, it's Thomas exposing the dick with which he'll slap every female competitor by cheating them. Another outspoken athlete was US women's soccer team captain and professional victim Megan Rapinoe, who gave Time magazine an interview last week. I'm 100% supportive of trans inclusion. People do not know very much about it. We're missing almost everything. Missing almost everything, you mean her team's goals versus an under-15 boys soccer team? I know, it was a scrimmage and didn't count, but it's telling that the US women's national team had to practice against teenagers because a men's pro team would have humiliated them further. Frankly, I think what a lot of people know is versions of the right's talking points because they're very loud, they're very consistent, and they're relentless. Those health textbooks that explain the differences between men and women only come out yearly, and she doesn't read them, so it makes sense to relentlessly remind her of what they say. At the highest level, there is regulation. In collegiate sports, there's regulation. And at the Olympic and professional level. It's not like it's a free-for-all where everyone's just doing whatever. True, because only the trans women are doing whatever. Like taking spots from women at the Olympics and flying up the leaderboards more than DSP in a mobile game. And I think people also need to understand that sports is not the most important thing in life, right? Life is the most important thing in life. Unless competing in sports is a girl's ticket to a better life, in which case Rapinoe thinks she should just let male athletes in wigs stomp on her. And so much of this trans inclusion argument has been put through the extremely tiny lens of elite sports. Like, that is not the way that we need to be framing this question. We're talking about kids. We're talking about people's lives. We're talking about the entire state government coming down on one child in some states, 3 children in some states. They are committing suicide because they're being told that they're gross and different and evil and sinful and they can't play sports with their friends that they grew up with. Not to mention trying to take away health care. I think it's monstrous. Specifically, it's an imaginary monster in the closet. Nobody is offing themselves over sports, and nobody would come down on athletes if they just knew their place. Trans women are welcome to play alongside their peers, only if it's fair to do so. People should call out cheaters. Instead, trans female athletes get more props for playing the opposite gender than single moms on Father's Day. I would also encourage everyone out there who is afraid someone's going to have an unfair advantage over their kid to really take a step back and think, what are we actually talking about here? We're talking about people's lives. I'm sorry, your kid's high school volleyball team just isn't that important. It's not more important than any one kid's life. Meanwhile, if you tell Rapinoe that her soccer team isn't that important, she'll sue for equal pay. If someone told Rapinoe years ago that her high school soccer team just wasn't that important, and that she should allow a trans female team to compete with hers for a scholarship, then she wouldn't be nearly as dominant at her sport and would probably be a nobody today. Show me the evidence that trans women are taking everyone's scholarships, are dominating in every sport, are winning every title. I'm sorry, it's just not happening. It is happening, just not in every sport, because they've only recently figured out that identifying as women is like using a Smurf account in an offline game. If we let everybody compete together, then the evidence would be overwhelming. Also, trans women don't have to win every single time for their advantages to be obvious. By the end of his swimming career at UPenn this year, Lia Thomas went from 65th on the men's team to 1st on the women's team in the 500-yard freestyle, and 554th on the men's team to 5th on the women's team in the 200-yard freestyle. If you can't beat them on a lower difficulty. So we need to start from inclusion, period. And as things arise, I have confidence that we can figure it out, but we can't start at the opposite. That is cruel, and frankly, it's just disgusting. That denthead is as bad with history as she is with science. We did start from inclusion, and issues began to arise, from the high school level all the way up to the Olympics. Fortunately, sports governing bodies seem to be figuring out what's happening. Trans female athletes want to compete with women because the gold at the end of the rainbow is a case full of trophies and medals. Rapinoe already secured her bag and isn't going to play soccer much longer. She likely won't have to worry about getting outplayed by a dude, so she doesn't care about undermining the system that made her successful if it makes her more money on her way out. The US women's national team might accept the science of this matter if they play serious games with men's pro teams. They're so disconnected from reality that the only time they'll touch grass is when the competition leaves them lying helplessly on it. Like the video and subscribe to the channel, now.
Everybody drugs their body sometime. Everybody tries the gear somehow.